Happy New Year, everyone! I'm Jennifer,
I'm Jessica, and you're listening to The Way, the Truth, and the Lies,
where we talk about our personal experiences with spirituality and faith.
Today we will continue sharing our stories about our personal experiences with YWAM, Youth with a Mission. Originally, we had only one episode planned for this topic, but when we started talking, we realized how much we had to say, so we're splitting the episode into two parts. This is part 2.
Last time we talked about what YWAM is and what their mission statement is: to know God and to make Him known. Today we want to share even more of our personal experiences when we did our DTSs, Discipleship Training Schools, a schooling program that's supposed to teach you how to live a lifestyle of missionary work. Okay, so lecture phase was over, and then comes the outreach phase, which you, Jesse, you didn't actually go on because you weren't feeling well. You were sick.
I couldn't walk.
But you're later going to talk a little bit about your mini outreach during your DTS.
Yeah.
But so outreach phase is something that I can touch on more, I guess, because I did the 2-month outreach in Ecuador. So most of our outreach was in Quito, the capital of Ecuador, the highest capital in the world. And then we had 1 week at the edge of the jungle. And then we were supposed to have 2 weeks in the jungle, even though that whole thing went horribly wrong and we only were there for 1 week. I'm going to tell that a little bit later. Just looking back on my outreach, first of all, it was complete chaos. But secondly, it feels now to me, now I don't know if this is true, but it feels pointless. I don't feel like we actually made any difference. In that country. Like, maybe to our translator who was with us every single day, we were like a blessing or whatever. But the issue was that we weren't being there for 2 months and doing the same thing with the same people. We were somewhere else almost every single day. Those 1 day kind of things, I don't know. I mean, they will say to you, well, we're sowing seeds.
Yeah.
And if it, if the seed falls on fruitful ground, then God can do with it what He wants to do with it, which, fine. I mean, my life was incredibly changed by just an outreach team from another YWAM school being with my church for 1 week.
True, yeah, you talked about that.
I don't know. To me, it feels like we did nothing in the end, and we didn't actually change any lives. But of course, I don't know the actual impact we had. I'm not in contact with those people anymore. Another issue also was that we were all very young. I mean, our leader, who was the eldest, was 25.
That's a kid.
Yeah, and the other leader, we had 2 leaders with us, and the other one was, I think, 22.
That's even more of a child.
So very young, and then the rest of us were even younger. Not just that we were young, we were also utterly inexperienced of how to deal with people who have actual problems going on in their lives. We'd be confronted with people who were severely traumatized, and they would come up to us and want our help or our advice or our prayer or whatever, and it was overwhelming. I remember one particular conversation where a woman came up to me and she said she had severe money problems, and that in her past she had already previously been forced to work as a sex worker, and that now she was scared due to her financial issues that she would have to go back into sex work, and she really didn't want to. All I heard was, oh, you need God's forgiveness. That's all I was taught. Sexual sin, God needs to in the way I had been taught, that was all that registered with me.
That's not what she needs to hear.
It's not what she needed at all. And so I was like, God forgives you. And she was like, yeah, I know. I just need some prayer that I don't have to do this work again. Like, I want some financial stability. So that's what she actually wanted for me, was just some prayer for that. But it's just one example of a situation where, I was 18 years old, completely overwhelmed with someone coming up to me telling me, So I might have to be a sex worker because of my financial issues. And it's the kind of stuff where I feel like I failed people in a way.
Yeah.
Because they looked up to us as the missionaries, you know?
Yeah.
And we didn't have the training to be what they needed us to be.
The only thing you could have really helped her is if you had started a GoFundMe for her, or,
Yeah.
you know, had started a fundraiser for this woman. Like, she doesn't need to hear that God forgives her. Well, great. But she's still in financial problems. You know, she still has a bad financial situation. And you telling her that Jesus loves her will not do anything for her.
Yeah. I mean, another thing that happened was that we went to an elementary school in a very poor neighborhood where a lot of crime happened and a lot of their parents were criminals, I think. And we went there and we asked the kids, you know, like you will ask kids, hey, what do you want to be when you grow up? And they'd be like, a murderer. Stuff like that. And they were serious.
What?
And we were like,
God forgives you.
We totally know what to do with this. And so we went back home, we prayed, you know, because we knew we would be there one more day. And so I had like this impression where I was like, well, they already have like this warrior spirit within them where they want to be murderers. And so there seems to be a certain fight inside them. So let's talk to them about spiritual warfare.
Oh, Jenny.
No. You think this is going to take a bad turn. It did not.
Oh.
We went back there and we talked to them about fighting, but fighting with love.
Oh, okay.
Using love as your weapon. And they were so moved.
Oh.
They were so moved, those kids, like crying. They were running to us. They were like, yes, we want to do a love war, you know? Like,
Aww,
it was cute. Like, I mean, children, you know, even when they seemed tough at first, I mean, it was elementary school, they still were soft-hearted kids.
Yeah.
And we really felt like, dang, we changed their lives. And then we came back a month or a month and a half later to that same elementary school. And, you know, we were expecting these light-filled children.
Because of one conversation, yeah.
Yeah.
That's how it works.
Obviously, that didn't happen. They were just as depressed as the first day we had met them.
Yes, because you did not remove them from their current circumstance.
Yes. It was so discouraging.
Oh.
I thought maybe if we had just worked with them for 2 months, maybe we could have made a small little difference. But even then, I'm skeptical. But our one day, it did nothing for those kids.
Yeah, because again, you didn't give them any physical aid.
Yes, in fact, their parents are the ones who needed the help.
Yeah.
Because, you know, there were kids telling us they were being beaten at home. It was tough. And we just weren't able to help them.
No.
And it was devastating. It was really sad. And I hope those kids are doing well, but I'd be surprised. First of all, like I said, I don't think we helped a lot of people. But then secondly, our entire outreach was so disorganized. And the issue was also that it was the first time for the LA base to even organize an outreach in Ecuador. So we were kind of the explorative team to see what works and what doesn't. And there were things that didn't work, let me tell you. Because we were staying at this place, the apartment that we were renting, that belonged to somebody who had contacts with the Waurani tribe, a native tribe that's actually only gotten in contact with the outside world in, like, I think the 50s. It's pretty new for them to be in contact with the rest of the world. And there's, back then at least, there were even still some parts of the tribe that were still living with their native culture and not in contact at all with anybody else because they would always kill anybody who came close to them.
I mean, actually good for them. Because
right?
You don't want capitalism.
I'm also thinking that. I'm like, good for you. But I mean, from what they told us is that it's apparently a very violent culture, and I don't know if it's a very happy culture. It seemed to me like being in touch with the outside world definitely didn't benefit them. Like, they were all super poor, super uneducated, and their culture was completely dying. I mean, the children didn't even speak the language anymore. I mean, missionaries would come in, they would all convert, stop being violent, and then the oil companies would come in and take complete advantage of them because now they could, because now they wouldn't kill them anymore. So that's actually all that missionary work did for them, is to make them now exploitable by oil companies. And it was just a huge disaster for that tribe. But I mean, it wasn't our fault. Okay, at least that wasn't our fault. So he was in contact with this tribe, and so he organized for us to be there for 2 weeks, but he did not organize well. We knew we wouldn't have any food and any water that we could, maybe some food we could get there, maybe, but definitely no water because the tap water and the river water and everything is super, super polluted because of those oil companies. The Waorani, they have really tough stomachs and they can, but we cannot. What happened is that the guy who organized everything just didn't account for enough water at all. And I mean at all. I think after 5 days we didn't have any water left. Also, not enough food. By the end, we were only living off canned tuna and like weird candy that he had brought actually for the Waorani that we were eating because we were hungry.
Didn't you even, like, I remember you being like, not being able to eat canned tuna for years.
Yeah, I was so sick of tuna after that.
That's crazy. Like, you literally almost perished in the jungle.
Yeah. We called him, I think on day 5, and said, hey, we're out of everything. Could you either bring more or pick us up? Yeah, I'll come over. Next day he wasn't there. And then we went to a market with some motorcycles to buy some more water, which lasted us like 1 more day. And we would call him again, hey, we're dying.
Hey, we're dying over here.
Oh, yeah, I'm basically on my way. I mean, this went on for 3 days. And he, on the 3rd day in the morning, he showed up. And we had spent, at that point, we had spent 12 hours without any water. What was also crazy to me, and it made me so mad, we were struggling with the water, okay? We were running out and quickly. And our leader did not like confrontation. The Waorani, because our water was just this big thing standing around where everybody could just get water whenever they wanted, they started drinking our water too.
Great.
And I said to her, hey, could you maybe say something to them? Because they can just drink their water and we can't. So we're kind of in a tricky situation here. She got mad at me. She was like, what? You really have an issue with water and you need to relax now and da-da-da-da. And I mean, obviously I was right.
Yep.
You know, later, and this is so hypocritical, but later she told me, I totally had the situation under control. I could have gone to that market at any time again and just gotten more water. I'm like, yeah, that's why we didn't have any for 12 hours. That makes sense. She just didn't want to admit that the situation was utterly out of control.
And that she completely fucked it up.
Yeah. Her and our other leader, and especially that guy. I mean, it wasn't her fault that other guy who said, yeah, I'm an expert here, blah, 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 you know, that he was so unreliable and that he wouldn't come when we told him we needed him to come. I mean, it took him 3 days to actually get on his way. And at the end of it, 3 girls had a bladder infection.
Right.
And one of them was in severe pain in her stomach. We didn't know why. And she was screaming through the night. And I mean, it was just insane. I was like, if he doesn't come tomorrow, I don't know what will happen to us. Luckily, he was there in the morning and he drove us to a hospital and we bought water and we bought cookies and stuff. And because we weren't eating, I had such like stomach pain for days after still because my stomach was so confused and I wasn't the only one. It was just a situation where you're like, damn, we came way too close to a tragedy here. Like, not okay. I mean, another thing that happened that was kind of my fault, but also our leaders not really taking the control they should, was when we were in the rainforest. And one day we took a 45-minute walk to another village in the rainforest to teach there and preach there. And on our way back, I thought the people on my team were walking way too slowly. And so I was like, well, I know the way, it's just straight ahead. And I walked quicker than them, and I walked past our village.
Good job. Sense of orientation, check.
And I kept walking and walking, and so much time had passed, and I was walking past this construction site with a bunch of men just leering at me, being like, ooh, you know? Like,
ugh.
Creepy. And I was like, this construction site wasn't there when we came the other way.
They built that really quickly.
I think I'm lost in the rainforest right now.
Shit.
But I was too scared to turn around because of the construction site. I was like, I don't want to walk past there again. So I just kept walking and I started like crying and praying. At one point, I even saw maybe 100 meters away from me, and I couldn't see it very clearly, but a huge black animal crossed the road. Don't know if it was like a panther. I don't know if they have panthers there, but they definitely have like these pigs, like huge black pigs in the rainforest there. So it might have been one of those. Now, at that point, I was so checked out. I was like, I'm gonna die anyway. Snake's gonna bite me. Panther's gonna eat me. I don't know, but I'm gonna die. You know,
Oh no.
I was going crazy. I think I walked around for maybe an hour until they came to find me with the car, and they were crying and I was crying and everything.
Like, Jenny!
No. I can't really say it was our leader's fault. I mean, should they have said, hey, stay with us, maybe. But also, they didn't think I wouldn't find my way, you know? And then something else with this rainforest story is that afterwards, I found out that we were actually in a malaria area. We didn't have any medicine with us. We didn't have, like, you know, we barely protected ourselves against mosquitoes. And what happened is that one of us got malaria, which was our leader. And what happens very, very rarely with malaria is that won't have any symptoms, but it will attack their kidneys. And then they will have kidney failure.
Wow.
And that's exactly what happened. A month later, when we were back in LA, suddenly she fell asleep and didn't wake up anymore. After, I think, a day or two of not waking up, her roommates were like,
she's sleeping a
this
lot.
isn't normal. They couldn't even wake her anymore. They brought her to a hospital, and apparently both her kidneys had failed. She was peeing black urine, and it was just, she nearly died. Like, this is not an exaggeration. She nearly died, and they were just like about, you know, very close to not being able to save her. She made it, you know, it was the whole base was praying, and everybody, at the time we didn't even understand what it was. But years later, I learned that this is something that can happen with malaria. And, you know, a little more protection, a little more preparation.
So many things, yeah, that could have been prevented just by thinking 2 steps ahead. Get the malaria shot, get the medicine, everything.
That is how disorganized a outreach can be.
Mm-hmm.
That's how close to dying you can get.
Multiple times.
You know, the younger leader guy, at the end of our outreach, he suddenly had this, we didn't know what was wrong with him. He locked himself in his room and didn't come out anymore for multiple days. So our older leader was just on her own. It would just, again, you know, like, you just have these people leading stuff that are just not prepared. And he was probably going through something. It shouldn't happen. It just shouldn't happen.
No.
But then what really messed me up back then, where I was like, what? Because I took everything that they had taught us very, very seriously, you know, the whole purity thing and the whole giving our life to Jesus and living 100% and blah, blah, blah. And so we had done an outreach, being super holy. And then the last week of our outreach was like a vacation week. And it was just the most hypocritical thing. Because suddenly we were going clubbing and some of our team started making out with guys in the club. Even invited them over to our apartment.
Oh.
And kept partying there. And I was just like, what is happening right now? What is happening? What are we doing? I don't understand nothing. It was so weird. It was so weird. How can we be so holy and then suddenly, you know, our holy time is over and now we're like, okay, let's just forget all of that.
Time to party.
It made me feel so upset. Which, like, you know, probably I was the one who took the whole thing way too seriously. But it's just, in my mind, I'm still like, come on, you're preaching us all these things, and then suddenly it's like, oh, okay, now it's vacation. Now I can ignore everything that we've been preaching all the time. It's one of those hypocritical things that can just really rile me up, you know? And also, at the end of that outreach, they gave all of us a feedback, a personal feedback. They told me I have to learn to be, like, less critical and more positive. Because I was always the one, when things went wrong, to be like, things are going wrong. We need to prepare better. I was always the one calling them out.
That's just, first of all, you're German. Second of all, you're our mother's daughter, so...
Yeah, for sure. But I was right, you know? Yep. It wasn't like I was just being difficult.
No.
It was complete chaos.
You're like, hey, we almost died. Don't be so negative.
Yeah, stop. Don't be so critical. Because what had started happening was that when we would go somewhere, I would prepare, I would take things with us for the entire team that we might need. So I would have, I would have an extra blanket with me. I would have medicine with me. I would have an extra water with me. Things like that. There were multiple situations where I was like saving our team, because there was another situation where we didn't have any water anymore because a kid had spit into that water.
Right.
And so we didn't have a water for a few hours, but I had an extra water. And so I shared it with the team. And so they started calling me like the secret leader. And my actual leader did not like that. By the end of the outreach, I could sense that she was kind of fed up with me.
I mean, but girl, just then do it better.
Yeah, but she's a live in the moment kind of person, which is fine.
Yeah, but don't be a leader.
And she was very kind and empathetic, and she had a lot of good leading qualities. But it's just the organizing part wasn't her thing. I was a lot better at that than her. And instead of relying on that and being like, oh, cool, let's use your skills and, help the team, instead she became jealous.
Great.
It just wasn't a great situation.
But again, she was only 25.
Yeah, 25 at least is when our brains are fully developed, but nevertheless, YWAM life had been her life for a long time, and the YWAM life just messes with you,
And if anyone can become a leader, you don't really have a role model to look up to either.
Yeah, exactly.
So, my outreach went a little bit differently because there was none. As I mentioned before, during my DTS lecture phase, I unfortunately fell ill and got an undiagnosed chronic illness at the time, which is called PCOS. I didn't get this diagnosis until 2 years later, and the way that this illness expressed itself in my body was that I was unable to walk. So because of this, I did not join my fellow students on their outreach. They went to 2 countries, one in Africa, one in Asia, and I was supposed to go to the one in Asia. In hindsight, I'm very glad I didn't go because, first of all, in this country, converting to Christianity is illegal, which is why I'm also not telling you which country it is. Also, missionary work was illegal, and my fellow students had to lie to enter the country. I also found out that they were only allowed to go outside in groups of 3s because the country wasn't safe for women, and the team was only consistent of women because the guys who were supposed to join them, one of them was kicked out and the other one left on his own volition. So it was a group of 7 girls, I think. They had 2 leaders, but then one of them had like a mental breakdown and had to leave. And so the leader left was my one-on-one who we already talked about. She started giving leadership roles and responsibilities to the other girls. So every single day, a different girl was a leader. Instead of packing these girls up and going back home with them because it was obviously not safe and this just is like a failed mission to me, they stayed the entire 10 weeks, did whatever. I don't know any big details of what they did there actually, but 2 stories I know is that in the end, to celebrate, they all went to this one place. Everybody in the base celebrated and was like, oh, they have the best food there. So my girls went there and all of them got food poisoning except the leader. And as you remember, that one-on-one was the one who didn't believe me when I couldn't walk and had to be rolled around in a wheelchair for weeks. She didn't believe the girls, even though they were throwing up. She didn't take them to the doctor, which was just negligence.
She's so weird.
Yeah, and in somewhere along the way also, they went horseback riding, and one of the girls fell off a horse and hurt her ankle, couldn't walk properly, and had to, actually rest. But again, my one-on-one didn't believe her, thought she just didn't want to participate in the chores. And so she made her do the chores in pain for weeks. And when she got back home, she had this huge, she had to go to multiple doctors and because it was like a bad sprain. And when you don't rest the sprain, it can turn into worse things. And so she had problems for a year or 2.
It's just crazy.
Yeah, because that leader, again, neglected to take care of the team. I just remembered one more thing. I heard from my girls that, and we were told this in advance, that the place that we're going in Asia, where their base was, didn't have heating. And they were going in winter time, and the maximum it got during the day was 12 degrees Celsius. Remember, one of them had bronchitis earlier? She still had bronchitis. So she was sick. It was also the one that fell off the horse. I feel so sorry for her. This girl did not enjoy anything. Yeah, they should have been sent home. There's so many times when little stories they told me, why didn't you leave? Well, God, blah. Great God, blah. He wants you to die? Cool.
Yeah.
So that's the outreach stories that I have heard of from the outreach that I technically would have been a part of. And in hindsight, I'm glad I wasn't. But I still had an outreach during my lecture phase. So during my lecture phase, there were also 2 other DTSs in England, and they had the brilliant idea in week 6 of my DTS, let's all meet up in Brighton and chill there and send these kids who are homesick, send them on the streets to evangelize random strangers. Great idea. The issue, there were multiple issues, but one of the big issues was that the place where we slept, of course, they separated the boys and the girls, was this building that was 20 minutes from the chapel that we had our program at. So every morning we had to walk 20 minutes. If you wanted to shower, you had to walk another 20 minutes from the chapel to the showers. So yeah, I didn't shower for a week. And then we all slept in one room on mattresses that had holes in them. So 25 people in a room. You can imagine how straining that would be on the body, especially if you're already emotionally strained, because this was week 6 for us. We were homesick. We had issues, like in week 6, you get, when you're this constantly close with people you don't really know, the first fight started happening, things like that. And that's the week they decided to take us out of our comfort zone, which wasn't that comfortable to begin with, into an even less comfortable situation. Then we spent the entire week on the street talking to strangers. I remember being so overwhelmed and frankly a bit traumatized because that was my first time evangelizing on the street and it went horribly. There's this one thing we did. We put up mirrors in the street and asked people what they saw and then tell them what God saw in them. And I'm not a shy person, but I'm just not a person to evangelize on the street with strangers. That's just not me.
Because it's uncomfortable because people don't want you to talk to them.
No.
It's like you're selling them something.
Yeah, it's like, here's how you want to have eternal life. Repent! So it's just awkward.
Here's the price.
It was so uncomfortable because the moment I dared talk to a person, it was this man maybe in like his mid-30s, and I asked him, what do you see? And he looked at it and he said, I see an asshole. And I was like, well, God doesn't think so. And it was just so bad. And he was like, I don't believe in God. I'm an asshole. I'm going to hell. I don't really care. And then he left. And that was my first experience. I told it in the evening and then we did a prayer circle for this guy. I felt so bad because I felt this pressure that it was my responsibility to, change his mind about what he saw of himself, which is his own job and the work of a therapist, okay? That's not my responsibility.
Yeah.
And then there was this other thing in the morning sessions. They were like, ask God about a vision that you can tell to a stranger. And so they made us go into teams of 2 or something. And me and this other girl, we walked around and I had this vision of a dog. And then I approached a lady and her daughter and I said, like, I have this impression of a dog and blah, does this mean anything to you? They were like, no, we're cat people. And then they left. And so it was, again, like so weird and I felt so bad. But the other girl was like, sometimes God is weird, whatever. But it was just a bad week. And because it was so physically straining, because again, we had to walk for hours, first of 20 minutes in the morning, and it was very early in the morning, to this chapel. Then we walked around all day. Then the food was bad food. And all that combined, plus the stress that I felt, the pressure that I had about having to be a perfect Christian right now and it not working the way they told us it would work, you just have to tell one more person and then there will be a miracle. There was so much pressure. So this 1 week of outreach was basically the last drop in my immune system ticking over or overflowing with a glitch. We now have a glitch, and through that glitch that happened, I got this chronic illness. And I always wondered if we hadn't done that week, if that would have even happened or if I would have still gotten PCOS. But because of the stress, I think maybe it got like a jump start. One other thing I remember quite clearly, very vividly, was because Brighton is like the pride central of England and we were homophobes. They were like, beware, don't get influenced. It's a very dark place and we have to pray against the gays. And I remember seeing myself as someone, oh, I'm spiritually sensitive, I can sense these things. And so when I left the van, when I stepped onto the ground of Brighton, I felt like a huge heavy cloud just come upon me. And we talked about self-fulfilling prophecies before, and I think this was one of those things. And I wasn't the only one. Like, there's this other girl, like both of us, we were doing spiritually really badly in that week because we said we felt the gay vibes. You know, it's just like, girl, what does that even mean? It's like, we didn't have a gaydar.
There's too much queerness in the air.
Yeah, too much queerness in the air. We have to pray it away. And I remember there was this one building where queer people met to just have community. And I don't know if you know this, there's this Bible story of where these people walked around a city 7 times and the walls fell down. Do you know which story that is?
The walls of Jericho.
Yes, the walls of Jericho. We did a walls of Jericho walk around that community thing and actively prayed against. So there was me and a group of 3 others. We walked around that thing 7 times and chanted Bible verses and stuff. And I am so embarrassed by that. If I think about this now, like, we're supposed to have a message of love, and here we are treating them as like the enemy, walking around their building chanting, like, huh?
It's also a form of spiritual warfare, right? Those
Yes.
kind of things. That means, yes, they are the enemy and you are at war, and yeah.
But literally, I mean, why are Christians homophobic? Not all Christians, but these kinds of Christians, well, they see that as the enemy. And not the people themselves necessarily, but the sin that they're living actively, which is just...
Yeah, I mean, we can do an episode maybe also once about how this is justified.
Yeah.
You know, because Christians, they're not, you know, walking around the world being like, I want to be hateful. It really makes sense for this theology to believe in this way. But maybe we can talk about that once in a different episode.
Definitely.
To just unpack that a little bit.
Yeah.
What's behind that.
Yeah, because when you're in the mindset, homophobia makes sense. But when you're outside of it, it's just hate. And that's it.
You recognize it for the hate it is.
Yeah.
But Christians will say, no, I love the sinner and hate the sin. I don't hate the people.
Rude. And it's so sad because Brighton is such a wonderful city, and I haven't gone back, but I really want to go back because of my outreach and because of my lecture phase. I had this disdain for England for a long time, just because my experiences with YWAM coincidentally were in England were so bad, and I got sick from it physically, literally chronic illness, that it took me years to find the love for a country that I actually really had for a long time. Like, it was my dream to become a writer, live in a cottage somewhere in the English countryside, right?
Yeah.
Well, that dream died with my DTS, but I can proudly say I love England again, and I have overcome this, but it took a while. So we've now talked a lot about outreach issues, why these outreaches aren't executed in the way they could be.
I'm sure not every single outreach is a failure, especially if you're going to countries that are more developed.
Yeah.
I think a lot of times when you go to countries with a lot of poverty and where it's dangerous and stuff, and you're just ill-prepared. For example, that outreach team that I met in Germany, I'm sure they had a better time than we did.
Because they were accommodated. They had medicines and stuff that they could get if somebody got hurt and stuff.
Yeah.
But when you're in the middle of the jungle like you guys, So we wanted to talk a bit about why our outreaches were sort of a failure. And the first one, obviously, it's not really properly organized or prepared, because there's this huge thing of let's go spontaneously where the Lord leads us. But if you're going to a country where people speak a different language, have a different culture, maybe aren't as, let's say, developed as the one where you come from, you can't just go in there willy-nilly following the voice of God into the jungle. You might die, and you didn't die, but there are stories of people who have passed away in missionary trips because they weren't prepared. Unfortunately, just recently, I've heard of someone who drowned in their outreach because of not being prepared properly and there being an accident that could have been avoided. So, like, people die, and this is serious.
Yeah, and like I said, my outreach leader nearly actually died. I mean, it was very, very close.
Yeah.
It was super, super close. The doctors were like, dang, well, we're glad we were able to save her, but they weren't sure if they could.
Exactly.
Because YWAM is all about hearing the voice of God. And so, in a way, too much preparation, I think, is almost seen as unspiritual. At least our outreach was so much every single day, kind of seeing what's going to happen and la la la. And it was so much like listening to the voice of God and seeing what he says. And I mean, it's not that nothing was organized. I don't want to say that. But you could just see that so many things weren't. To me, this is also connected to this idea that part of the goal of outreach is actually to challenge yourself.
Yeah.
And to step out of your comfort zone.
They said this to us, literally, they said this to us.
Yeah.
Anytime
same.
we had any issues, when we complained about something, they always brought up the comfort zone. God can only work when you're outside of your comfort zone.
Yeah. He can't work with you when you're just at home chilling.
Yeah.
You have to be uncomfortable.
Yes.
I don't know where they get this idea from, but apparently that's how it is. It's like this whole thing of you're dying to your flesh.
And your comfort.
Yeah, and there's such pride that people will take when they've experienced something incredibly uncomfortable, you know, like sleeping on the floor and drinking polluted water. And it's like, man, we were really stepping out of our comfort zone. We were really, and I'm just like, how does that help God
Exactly.
work through you more when you're tired and feeling horrible? Do you think you'll make a better impression on people like
Truly.
that?
And I remember friends of mine bickering about who had less comfort.
Really?
Yeah, I remember this now. You just triggered this memory. I don't remember who it was, but I remember there was this discussion.
In your DTS?
No, after like friends of ours that had done DTSs and outreaches, and then they were comparing their discomfort in outreach. Like, we did this, well, we did this. Like, we couldn't go to the bathroom because there wasn't enough water and stuff. And I'm like, huh?
Yeah.
And when I hear these things, I'm like, who organized this?
You're manipulated into taking pride in the discomfort. And also, when you don't take that pride, when you're like, this sucks, you are seen as a problem.
Yeah.
And you are immature, and it's like you're a lesser Christian, and God hasn't matured you enough. And so you're not able to die to yourself enough. And so that's why you're complaining right now.
Yeah.
You're manipulated into shutting up, letting them just put you in the worst situations, and you better take it because we're being really spiritual. And the more terrible it is, the more spiritual we are.
The better God will work through you.
It's also a kind of a thing of your personal thing, like, because a lot of this spirituality is about making yourself disappear and listening to yourself, to your body, to your needs as little as possible so that you will belong fully to God.
Exactly.
And fully to the church. It's just part of that whole system. And I mean, we did also have situations where we were supposed to sleep on the floor, and I've always had back issues, and after one night I had the worst migraine ever. I mean, I'd never had migraine before in my life. Suddenly I felt so terrible. You know, they were like, well, other people sleep on the floor. Yes. And in fact, the place where we were staying, the inhabitants of that village, it was part of their life to sleep on the floor.
Yeah.
But they're used to it,
Yes.
you know?
Koreans
Your
do that
body
too.
can get used to that when you do that for ever since you were born. You're just sleeping on the floor.
Yeah.
But our bodies aren't used to that.
No.
And you don't have to just be fine, especially like I wasn't able to function that day. I really wasn't. I felt so bad. I couldn't have any light, any noise, nothing.
I mean, we had mattresses, but they had holes in them. So I was also sleeping on the floor for an entire week, and it was cold. It was a cold stone floor that we were sleeping on in the winter. It was November.
But you and I, we were never really the non-complainers who took pride in. It's just not our style.
No.
We were always questioning way too much.
I'm like, why didn't you accommodate us?
Yeah.
It was like they had this random idea. Hey, there's 2 other DTSs right now. They're in week 2 and week 3. Let's all meet up in Brighton, the central of the evil gays. Who thought of this?
This whole like not preparing properly, it's also like, well, if we end up in a bad situation, it's fine. We're just stepping out of our comfort zone, you know, and we're just trusting the Lord.
And God will lead us.
Yeah.
Woohoo!
God will make it work. So there's not a lot of responsibility taking happening.
And tied into this is also another issue that you have very young, inexperienced leaders with very little life experience. So maybe even if something wasn't planned, somebody who's 40 would be able to handle the jungle situation better than somebody who's 25. And also, you have very inexperienced and very young students. Students who aren't trained to deal with a lot of stuff, and everyone, because you're away from home and you're uncomfortable and what, everyone is dealing with their own stuff. And so there's not a lot of leading experience and not a lot of, hey, I can lean on my leader. No, my leader is super overwhelmed. And in the case of my outreach that I didn't go to, my leader gave her leadership role to the students. And they had to take care of shopping, of the food, of the schedule of the day. And she would just wipe her hands clean, was like, it's not my responsibility. You're in charge today. In a country where it's illegal to convert, where women aren't safe, where they don't know the language, they are now supposed to know what to do. Huh?
Yeah, and I mean, she was probably just also completely overwhelmed.
She was.
Because they are so untrained.
Yep.
And so young.
And because she didn't want to be in the country. She wanted to be in the other country.
And also she has some sort of issues, what the fuck, like always with the, I don't believe you that you're sick.
Yeah.
What's up with this person? I just don't understand. But I mean, that's not a, I mean, her specifically to me isn't like a YWAM issue, that's just a
That was
her
her issue.
but also like, it just shows what type of people can become leaders. And they're just able to have this position without even being good at all at their job.
I remember there was so much guilt tripping with her as well. Like, she would make you feel bad if you set boundaries. She would make you feel bad if you prioritized your needs. And she would come with a comfort zone thing again. So there was no winning with this woman. And then she led my girls into that country. I'm so glad nothing bad, really bad happened to them, because things could have gone sideways with an unexperienced, inadequate leader like that.
Yeah. And so because of all this lack of preparation, because of the inexperienced leaders, because of the we're stepping out of the comfort zone, you're just thrown into sometimes traumatizing, sometimes physically dangerous situations with no training of how to deal with it, because your lecture phase, right, where you're supposed to be prepared for your outreach, it's focused on spiritual matters and not practical matters.
Yeah.
I mean, we had maybe a little bit of like, okay, in the jungle, if a snake comes toward you, how to act or something like that. Like very, very, very little bit for maybe one day. But that was it.
Wow.
And your physical safety is not prioritized oftentimes. And that's a real issue, because you're going there and you do have a certain trust, right? Because you know there are leaders. And yes, you even do have to sign something beforehand, like if you die, YWAM is not responsible. I mean, I had to sign that. Did you have to sign that?
Yeah, it's the no liability clause that they have.
Yeah. But you're like, yeah.
Nothing will happen.
You don't take that so seriously.
No.
You're just like, whatever, come on. You don't expect your safety and your well-being will not necessarily be a priority to the people who are responsible for you.
Yeah.
And so really bad things can happen. Let's just put it that way.
And they did teach us how to talk about Jesus with people of different faiths. At least they did that with me. Like how to talk about Jesus with a Muslim, how to talk about Jesus with a Buddhist, etc. But they did not teach us what to do when somebody falls off a horse. People can die from that. Or, you know, when you get food poisoning. Or in your case, what to do when you're stuck in the jungle with no water. So preparing you spiritually, and then they wipe their hands like, we did it, now they can go. They don't train you how to actually help traumatized people, how to help poor people, needy people. All you can offer them is Jesus, and that's supposed to be enough. Like we talked about your story with that former sex worker. All you could tell her was that Jesus loves her. She's like, that's great. Now, that doesn't change my situation. That doesn't change my desperate need of finances and my biggest fear of having to go back into this horrible life that I had to lead in order to have food on my plate. And then you tell them, well, God loves you. Well, great, cool. So it's literally not helpful, which is the opposite of what you want to be. This organization wants to help people, and YWAM does a lot of emergency work. You know, they go into places that were hit by typhoons and stuff and big natural disasters. They do disaster relief programs, which is great, but also with people who aren't really trained to do that.
Yeah.
So the intention is good, but the training could use a lot more overhaul.
Yeah, it's always the issue. I mean, the biggest issue is always the preparation. In our experience, YWAM, it doesn't take preparation seriously.
No.
Not preparing, like not organizing trips properly, but also not preparing the people themselves for what they are going to be met with. And obviously, you can't know everything,
No.
right? You don't necessarily know every single situation that's going to happen to you, but we were really prepared for nothing. If you know you're going to go to a school in the middle of a ghetto, for example, then you might have an idea of what those children might be dealing with and what they might need. You know, you could prepare people for those kind of things, but we weren't.
Yeah.
I really think that's the biggest YWAM issue is lack of preparation.
Exactly.
And just going with the flow, going with the Holy Spirit and being like, meh, it'll be fine. If you have an issue with that, then you're the problem.
Deflect, deflect, deflect.
So after outreach, you're gonna come back to the base for 2 weeks and have your debrief phase, which the main goal for that is to share about your outreaches, share testimonies with each other, and also to be prepared for life after DTS. Especially that second part, I think we were scared a lot about returning back home and losing the fire that we had gained in our DTS and that we would just go back to our old way of life. I just want to make it clear how awful that actually is, because what they're imagining is that you go home and you continue the YWAM lifestyle wherever your home is, which is so utterly unrealistic. It is simply impossible because on the YWAM base and the whole YWAM life, you have paid money so that you can basically take a vacation where you just focus on God for every single minute that you are there. And when you're back home, you can't do that.
Nope.
You're not on vacation anymore. You're not on your holy vacation where you can just be in the spirit all the time. First of all, you're not surrounded by people anymore, usually, unless you're living with evangelical Christians. But usually you will not be surrounded by people who are on the same spiritual high as you, but you'll be surrounded by people that you now perceive as lukewarm.
Or completely fallen off.
Oh, yeah. Instead, you will have the pressure that you have to try to ignite the flame in these people. And secondly, you have things that you need to do. You have a job, maybe you go to university, whatever, you have other things.
Or a family.
It's just impossible.
Yeah.
What they are trying to prepare you for in this debrief phase, it's simply not possible. And I know that the people who live on the base just don't get it.
No.
Like, they're not even trying to be evil and mean. They just don't get it because their life is on the base. And they are able to do this 24/7. And it's easy when you're there. But they're so checked out from reality. They just don't get what a normal life looks like. I mean, they're even paid by other people for being on the base and living only for Jesus. They will have give me money calls every 3 months.
Like GoFundMes and sponsorings and stuff.
Yeah, so that they can live that life. So other people are paying for them to do that. That is not what happens to the rest of us.
Nope. I can't just, I could try to get a GoFundMe. I think the first thing people would ask is like, what for? Girl, for you to live? I have bills to pay of my own. Like, who do you think you are?
Yeah. But if you have a spiritual reason to give people, then suddenly they will hand you money. They just don't get it.
No.
And so for me, when I got home, I always felt like I wasn't doing enough.
Yeah, same. And you know what's crazy? I didn't have a debrief, but whilst the debrief was going on from my other guys, they had me on a call and I said hi to everyone, then everyone left and then the leaders stayed and they were like trying to make sure, so are you still holy and will you come back and finish? Because you have a year to do an outreach. You can come to do this and to do that. I'm like, guys, I still can't walk. What do you what do you mean? They're like, no, but come anyway. I'm like, no. And then they were like, we're disappointed. And then we ended the call. So my last interaction was like, you're not on fire enough. You only have half a DTS. That's like the worst thing, basically. You have to finish it. And then you can never work with YWAM if you don't finish your DTS.
You're like, I don't want to.
They tried to scare me into things. I'm like, guys, I can't walk. I'm still trying to figure out what's going on in my body. I have other priorities right now.
Yeah, their whole life is YWAM. They just don't understand that there's other things, maybe even bigger things than YWAM.
What?
Oh
No,
blasphemy.
not possible.
But so for me, I had started with quiet time on my outreach. I did like these 15-minute things, I think, in the morning where I would get up before breakfast, and it was so nice. Because we were in Quito. We were a little bit on like a mountain cliff side, I guess, and we could really see the whole city on our balcony. It was so amazing. So those were, you already felt the Holy Spirit just by stepping up on that balcony.
Because you're closer to the heavens on that mountain.
Because it's just so pretty. It was so nice. So I started the quiet times and I really felt like, oh yeah, I like starting my morning that way. And so when I was in debrief, I did that every morning. I went to the chapel and I sat there for like 10 to 15 minutes and read the Bible, prayed. And there was always another guy, a guy who did a different school, who was also there. Actually, he was a guy that like so many girls had a crush on.
Except you, of course.
I wasn't there to date, okay? I was there to focus on God. I just didn't care.
I'm not here to date. I'm here to date Jesus, and that's it.
I was just like not even seeing anybody. I was like, no, God. Every morning we would both be there. And then he came up to me once and he was like, I just wanted to say it's so great that you're doing this right now with like the quiet time and spending that time with God. I know that it's a great preparation for when you go back home now, and I'm sure that you will continue that. You're already showing your faithfulness now. And
goodness.
And I mean, I was so happy. I was like, cool.
Yeah.
But it's one of those little building stones of pressure where it's like, yeah, that's true. I do have to continue that afterwards.
Then if you don't, you feel really bad because even that guy was like, oh, he had an impression from God, even approached me and stuff. And where I'm just like, honey.
And then we were sharing about our outreaches with each other. We had, like I said, also a team from Kenya and a team that went to Panama and Costa Rica. And we could just see that there was something up with the team from Kenya. They weren't acting right. They were crying all the time. They weren't really talking.
Oh, wow.
They seemed like people who came back from war, Like really, like traumatized people. I mean, that's how I imagine people who are traumatized. You could just see something happened to them, and we don't really know what, because they wouldn't talk to us about it. Like, all of us, we were sharing happily our YWAM outreach stories, and they barely told us anything.
That's like a telltale sign of trauma, when you're so shocked you can't even talk about it.
Yeah. Oof. I remember we went to that place like in front of the Universal Studios. Like we didn't go in the Universal Studios, but you know how there's in front of it, there's like all these stores and there's also an M&M store. And you know how M&M stores, they will have just these long, very high rows of just M&Ms, of all kinds of different M&Ms. I was there. I was walking next to a girl who had been on that Kenya outreach, and she started crying. And she said, I can't believe how much food they're wasting here. And then she ran away, and I was like,
what happened? You witnessed a trauma trigger.
Yeah, there was really like a reverse culture shock happening to the people who had been in Kenya.
Wow.
We were all just like, something is up with them. And years later, when they were finally able to talk about it.
How many years do you remember?
The first time I heard about it, it was 4 years later.
Dang.
When I met one of them again, and she told me that apparently they had spent a lot of their time in a clinic for children with cancer. And so they had seen a lot of children died that they had started to form connections with. And then those children died.
Oh, no. Oh my God. You can't put 18-year-olds through that. What?
And some of these young adults had already experienced horrible things in their life. They were already traumatized from their lives, and then they got re-traumatized.
They just added to that.
You cannot do that. You just can't do that.
Yeah, they gave him like PTSD and then complex PTSD on top of that.
You just can't do that.
No.
Not with young, inexperienced people, especially people who will not be able to do anything. They're neither medical nor psychological professionals. They're just there talking about Jesus, which, you know, it's like, well, at least the child gave their life to Jesus before they died.
Haha.
Like, oh, it's just so terrible. And I remember also that maybe this was actually 2 years after my DTS, we had a Facebook group, and one of the people from Kenya, she posted in that Facebook group that she still felt severely traumatized by that outreach. Again, she didn't talk about what had happened, but she said she needs therapy and everything, and she feels so helpless and lost. She doesn't know how to deal with what happened, and this is not what's supposed to happen.
No.
When you're doing a YWAM outreach.
No.
That is not what you're prepared for, what you're expecting. You're thinking you're going to go on the streets and talk about Jesus a little bit. You don't think you're going to watch children die every single day.
Come on. Not even medically trained professionals can handle that well. How are teenagers or people in their 20s supposed to know what to do?
Yeah.
They don't teach you how to compartmentalize in your lecture phase.
No, you have no skills of even like how to maybe not let it get to you so much or anything. So they were completely psychologically unprotected. And the team in Panama and Costa Rica, they were physically unprotected, even way more than my team.
Wow.
One of my friends, like I'm still friends with her, she has health issues to this day because of their outreach, because they were drinking the tap water without cooking it, without filtering it, anything, in the jungle. And so when she came back, she had terrible stomach issues. And she was running from doctor to doctor, and they couldn't really find what was wrong, but she was really suffering a lot. And then eventually she just figured that she couldn't drink milk anymore. And as long as she didn't drink milk, she was fine. She developed like a milk intolerance or lactose intolerance because of that.
And that's for life.
Yeah. And she still has that. And then they also had, I remember they told us these stories where they woke up and their entire stuff was covered with fire ants because apparently those ants are insane. They didn't leave any food open, but the ants had bitten through the plastic of their like Oreos or Pop-Tarts or something. And so everything was covered in fire ants for them. They also told us about a time where they were on the back of a cart and they were attacked in the night by huge bugs just flying at them like crazy. They regularly slept on church floors without mattresses and things like that.
Come on, dude.
We're just like, yeah, so one team was completely psychologically unprotected and the other one physically.
But because of your contract, YWAM is not liable, which is why neither your friend nor I can sue them for the long-lasting health issues we have now.
Yeah, you can't.
No, but that's the one preparation that they do, is that they aren't liable.
Yeah, they're like, at least we're protected. We're like, there's so much nonsense happening, like constantly people getting hurt. We need to protect ourselves a little bit.
We can't be liable for this. Instead of changing the system, they're like, responsibility to us?
Yeah. Another issue with my personal DTS was the dubious and unclear way that they dealt with money. You don't know yet what your outreach is going to cost before you start your DTS. And so we had one girl in my outreach group who didn't have enough money yet to go on her outreach. She had only paid for a lecture phase. She wasn't sure if she could go on outreach. And so she was constantly, asking for donations. And I also told my parents, oh no, she maybe won't be able to come and would be so sad. And she's such a necessary part of the group. And so they sent money to YWAM and specifically said it's for this girl, for her outreach, they didn't put it onto her account actually. They put it on mine instead. So that was already something where my mom was like, wait, what? No, we wrote this is for this girl, and for our daughter, we're going to pay later everything at once. And so it was just a weird thing where mom was like, what are they doing? They're just nilly-willy putting the money that I'm sending somewhere where I didn't want them to put it. But, maybe okay, mistakes can happen, fine. But then what happened with our outreach is that it actually didn't cost us much as we had paid, and we still had quite a bit of money left over. Then we were asked what we want to do with the money. It was one of those situations where some of us would have really liked to have the money back, to be like, okay, so we just get it back, that's all, it didn't cost that much. But we were kind of spiritually manipulated into donating it.
What?
I think for our translator.
Okay.
The one that had been helping us the entire time. We didn't get it back, even though some of us would have won it, but we voted for it.
Not okay. Everybody should be able to decide that for themselves. That's not a vote.
Yes, but also you weren't even really able to say something. I mean, listen, I was 18.
Yeah.
You think I'm gonna have a strong discussion with them about like money, and especially in such a spiritual place where money is seen as the enemy and it shouldn't be your master. You don't want to be the one being like, hey, I want my money back. It was just another thing where I was like, thinking about it now, that wasn't okay.
Nope.
And I know that afterwards, we were all talking among ourselves in my group, and we all were kind of like, wait, but actually none of us are okay with this, right? And so we approached our leaders afterwards when we were back at the base, and we wanted to have a conversation about it. But how these things will often go, everybody will complain together, and then once we are there and we're actually talking to the leaders, people will suddenly get really shy and like, what? No, actually it's really fine for me, and they don't have the courage anymore to speak up. So I was the only one speaking for the group. And so the leaders kind of already saw me as the complainer. So they were like, well, is it really you who has the issue, or is it your whole group? And I was like, no, it's the group. And so one girl actually finally decided to speak up and said, no, it is all of us. But they just ignored it, and they were like, well,
Too late. Sucks a suck.
Your money is gone, and well, that's just how it is. I just hate that whole thing of, because I was the person who would say, hey, this isn't organized well, and would call them out, that you are suddenly pushed into like you're just a problem. And I'm really not, my personality isn't an aggressive type of personality. I mean, you know me, Jessie. I'm not constantly like the yelling around and being mean to people and stuff.
You don't throw tantrums.
So when I say something, it's because it's serious. Still, for them, they saw me as such a problem that for a long time after my DTS, I saw myself as a problem and as needing to be more positive, which is just crazy to me how much influence that can have.
It's so crazy because then you have this stamp of like, oh, she's just the tantrum maker, like we don't take her seriously, blah, blah, blah. When you're just like, no, actually the issue is you can't take criticism.
Yeah, no, they did nothing wrong.
Nope, they did nothing wrong.
Never.
So, in conclusion, the all you need is God mindset that you go into your outreach with or your lecture phase with and everything is so dangerous and untrue because you're human. You need sleep. You need comfort. You need proper food. You need clean water. And those are basic needs. You need these to function. But those needs, those basic needs, are challenged during lecture phase and especially during outreach. And unfortunately, because of inadequate leadership, bad decisions are being made very often, as we have established now in a lot of personal stories. And so because of this major lack of proper preparation, this program, DTS Discipleship Training School, can induce trauma in the students and endanger them physically as well as psychologically, as we have established with the story about the people from Kenya, from Jenny, but also for me. Now physically, I have a chronic illness that was triggered because of the lack of preparation and proper care, because of the negligence that they had. But you can't sue them.
Yeah.
However, because of the way that it's structured and how extreme it is, and how you're, as a young person, thrown into this program, being taught various different spiritual things, and then being thrown into different countries where you suddenly have to only hold on to God and what you know, it is the perfect school to radicalize young minds, which is the main reason we wanted to talk about it.
Yeah, and you can see that so many people do a DTS, and it has such a huge influence on the evangelical sphere. Young people come back very, very radicalized, very on fire for God, thinking in this black and white thinking that we talked about also in our episode 3. I do think YWAM actually has a huge impact.
Yes, it does. Because most of my black and white thinking happened in YWAM.
Same.
It was founded there. My foundation of my black and white thinking was YWAM. And I didn't even do an outreach. It was just my lecture phase.
Yeah, because that's where it mainly happens. I think outreach is more the shock factor. The lecture phase is where you're really indoctrinated.
Yeah, and I mean, we know it from our own experience. It really radicalizes you because this took us years to unlearn. What we learned in those 3 months took us years to unlearn and unpack and question and rethink.
Yeah. Coming back, I know that suddenly my parents, who had raised me as a Christian, seemed lukewarm to me.
Yeah, same.
And like not good Christians. And like I had to evangelize them. Even though they were totally Christian.
Yeah,
you know?
they were totally fine. But you come back with this, I know how the world works.
Yeah, and my parents don't.
And I have to fix this that isn't working the way it's supposed to. You apply this to every area of your life.
Yeah.
Which is what you're taught. So it's a perfect school to radicalize young minds.
That's it for today's episode. Just a reminder, this podcast is not about trying to convince anyone of anything, but about sharing our experiences and maybe help others realize they are not alone with their faith struggles.
Next time, we will talk about positive things of our Christian experience. Thank you for listening to us talk about our journeys and tuning into The Way, the Truth, and the Lies, hosted by
Jennifer
and Jessica.
Enjoy the new year, guys. Hear you next time.